just a glance away. That's all it took for a routine day to turn into a nightmare, for a child to vanish into a wilderness known for its unforgiving nature and its predators. When he was found, every news report called it a miracle, a triumphant rescue. But the moment this photograph surfaced, the world knew the miracle was a lie. The truth of the Montana woods is far darker. This is the story of 3-year-old Ryker Webb, a little boy from the remote Bull Lake area of Lincoln County, Montana. His disappearance in 2022 gripped the nation, and his eventual discovery was nothing short of a miracle. To understand the severity of this case, you must first understand the setting. This is the Kootenai National Forest. It is rugged, it is vast, and it is brutally unforgiving. Cell service is non-existent in much of this area. It is mountainous, heavily wooded, and crisscrossed with logging roads that are easy to get lost on. Even in June, the temperatures drop fast when the sun sets, sinking into the low 40s. The threat here isn't just the cold or dehydration, though, it's the wildlife. We're talking mountain lions, black bears, grizzlies. The odds of a 3-year-old surviving even one night here are frankly terrifyingly slim. On Friday, June 3rd, 2022, life was quiet. Ryker was last seen by his father around 3 p.m., playing outside with the family dog. The father stepped inside for just a moment, a routine, everyday action. When he came back out, Ryker and the dog were gone. The parents and immediate neighbors launched an initial search. They scoured the property and the nearby tree line, hoping Ryker had just wandered to a friend's house or a neighbor's shed. When their frantic searching yielded nothing, the alarm was finally raised. At 4:53 p.m., a call went into the Lincoln County Sheriff's Office. The response was immediate. Lincoln County Sheriff Darren Short and his deputies, volunteer firefighters, and local search and rescue teams were deployed instantly. The clock was ticking, and with sunset approaching, every minute mattered. But nature immediately delivered a brutal blow. A darkness set in. The area was hit with severe weather, torrential rain, and thick, heavy, low clouds. This wasn't just miserable for the ground crews, it was crippling for the search effort. The crucial high-tech tools, the drones, and the specialized National Guard helicopters couldn't fly. They were grounded by the low visibility and dangerous flying conditions. For a search team trying to find a 3-foot-tall child in miles of dense forest, losing air support was devastating. They were forced to search blind, relying solely on searching by foot, using flashlights and dog teams. Dozens of professionals and volunteers joined the effort. The local sheriff office issued a code red alert to all surrounding homes, pleading with residents to check their property, their sheds, their boats, and their outbuildings. The hope was small, that the child was simply hiding, wet and scared, but close to home. Despite the torrential rain and thick fog, the search teams kept moving, working to expand the perimeter before Ryker could travel too far. And then they found a small, groundbreaking clue. Searchers noticed overturned rocks on the trail behind the house. Ryker, like many children his age, was fascinated by bugs and insects. The overturned rocks told the team that he wasn't just walking aimlessly, he was engaged, he was curious, and he was walking with a purpose, albeit a child's purpose. This small detail helped establish a direction of travel. Dog teams were crucial, but the scent was being washed away by the relentless rain. They were working against the clock to establish a clean trail before the night's conditions made any further tracking impossible. The search perimeter was now spreading rapidly, widening to the nearest roads and the challenging terrain of the hills. As the temperature plummeted into the 40s, the desperation grew. This wasn't just a search, it was a desperate race against hypothermia. A 3-year-old child wearing only a light shirt and pants cannot regulate their body temperature in those conditions. Every minute meant a loss of core heat and a decrease in responsiveness. The first night was a total loss. Despite the tireless work of dozens of people, there was no sign of Ryker Webb. He had spent his first night alone, lost, cold, and exposed in the unforgiving Montana wilderness. This is where the story shifts from a search for a lost child to a genuine survival situation. The public and the search teams braced themselves for the dawn of day 2, fully aware that the survival window for a child of this age had just drastically narrowed. The morning of June 5th, the operation was now full scale. Over 50 active searchers from multiple agencies were mobilized. The local sheriff's office, David Thompson Search and Rescue, Flathead County, and renewed air support. The focus shifted from the immediate perimeter to a much wider, more challenging area. Searchers were now tackling the dense, rugged sections of the Kootenai, focused on the nearby Bull River drainage and logging trails. They knew a child could cover surprising ground, especially if they were following a trail or a riverbank. The primary fear wasn't just the elements, it was the wildlife. A 3-year-old child is easy prey. The searchers were constantly on alert, not just for the boy, but for signs of dangerous wildlife activity. The fact that the family dog had not returned added an agonizing level of dread. Had the dog been the target, or had the dog stayed with Ryker? By now, the story was national news. The combination of the child's age, the severe conditions, and the remote location created a desperate sense of urgency across social media. People around the world were following the updates, but with every passing hour, now well past the 24-hour mark and heading towards the 48-hour mark, hope was realistically fading. The search was exhaustive, meticulous, and focused on covering every logical pathway a lost child might take. Teams were using maps, GPS coordinates, and grid systems, but the sheer vastness of the Kootenai National Forest meant they couldn't be everywhere at once. In what seemed like a miracle, the discovery came not from the organized search, but from an entirely different source. A local family, unconnected to the search effort, was visiting the remote cabin, located approximately 2.4 miles from the Webb home. The couple was checking on their property, specifically heading toward the small wooden shed that housed their generator. As they approached the structure, they heard it, a faint noise, a whimper, the unmistakable sound of a small frightened child. Inside the small shed, huddled and shivering, was Ryker Webb. He was alive. The exhausted, dirty, and terrified child was found 2 days after he had walked away from his yard. Law enforcement and paramedics rushed to the remote location. Sheriff Short reported that Ryker was found in good spirits, but was visibly shaken, describing him as being hungry, thirsty, and cold. He was wearing the clothes he disappeared in, a blue onesie, now tattered and dirtied, with holes worn through the toes and feet. Against all odds, against the near-freezing rain, the dense woods, and the constant threat of predators, the little boy had survived. The discovery ended the desperate search, and Ryker was quickly taken to the hospital for a full examination. As the world breathed a collective sigh of relief, the immediate question was asked, how? How did a 3-year-old toddler, lost for 48 hours in this dangerous environment, manage to survive a trek of nearly 2.5 miles? When the photograph of the found boy was released, it further fueled the mystery. What did he see? And why does he no longer look like the boy who left? There are many theories as to what happened to that sweet, innocent boy. In the picture, Ryker's eyes are wide. They are recessed, and they carry a vacant, 1,000-yard stare. They are not the eyes of a child relieved to be found. For the internet, this was the smoking gun. This profound, immediate psychological change suggests a trauma so deep, so outside the realm of normal experience, beyond just cold and rain, that his spirit was instantly altered. This is the look of a child who saw something that shouldn't exist. Ryker was also found wearing a light blue onesie, thin and now torn to the feet. How did he endure 2 nights of near freezing temperatures in the low 40s in light, wet clothing? He should have succumbed to hypothermia within hours. His body temperature should have failed, yet he was alive. His survival defies the logical science of exposure, forcing us to ask if something else, something unearthly, was keeping him alive. Or perhaps keeping him somewhere else entirely. Also, a 3-year-old walking 2.4 miles through dense, unforgiving woods in a state of terror or shock defies belief. This is not a flat park. This is mountainous terrain, thick with underbrush and sudden ravines. The logical probability of a toddler achieving this distance in a relatively straight line without falling or becoming completely entangled is near zero. And then the location itself, the shed, not a hollow log, not a tree well, but a small, man-made structure designed to house a generator. Why there? How did a child, scared and disoriented, bypass dozens of natural shelters to find this single remote, isolated, and perfectly protective wooden box? To the theorist, the shed was not found by accident. It was the endpoint of an unnatural journey guided by an unknown intelligence, or perhaps placed there by a force that needed to deliver the child back to the world, but only after his experience was complete. The most frustrating and most compelling aspect of the mystery lies in the words of the survivor himself. When Ryker was found, he was visibly shaken and barely spoke to anyone. The few coherent details he gave were instantly unnerving. He mentioned he saw bears and that he was walking for a long time, but beyond that, the 48 hours were a blank slate. Missing 411 researchers cite this vague memory and sudden silence as a key signature of paranormal encounters. The memory is there, but the mind cannot access it. Or perhaps the mind has been protected from the true horror of the experience. What kind of trauma is required to erase a 48-hour experience from the mind of a child? Was it the cold, or did he encounter something that caused a complete psychological defense mechanism to kick in, severing the link to the memory? The fact is, Ryker Webb cannot tell us what happened. The final piece of the puzzle is the public's reaction and the lasting ambiguity of the officials. Despite the sheer volume of searchers, specialized dogs, and high-tech aerial drones, the organized search failed. Ryker was found by an unconnected family miles outside the main search area. The official effort found nothing. The lack of a clear, verifiable track, the lack of a rational survival explanation, and the profound visual anomalies in his photo all combined to convince the world that the official report of accidental wandering was simply not the full story. The very miracle of his survival became the root of the lasting doubt. Of all the strange accounts surrounding Ryker Webb, one theory dominated the conversation and convinced millions that the official narrative was a lie: the replacement theory. This theory claims that the boy found in the shed was not the original Ryker Webb, but a look-alike child, substituted during the massive search effort, and the primary proof, according to the theorist, lies in the structural anomalies. Online communities claim that when you analyze the bone structure, particularly the shape of the forehead and the spacing of the temples, the boy in the rescue photo is fundamentally structurally different from the boy who went missing. The scenario goes like this. Ryker vanishes, and within the initial 2-hour window before the alarm was officially raised, a tragic event occurred. The original Ryker Webb was gone, but with the massive scale of the search about to descend on the Lincoln County, a cover-up was initiated. The conspirators, whether it was a secret kidnapping ring or local figures desperate to avoid scrutiny, found a similar-looking child. This child was placed specifically in the remote shed 2.5 miles away to ensure the discovery would look like a miracle survival far away from the initial location of the tragedy. The theorists argue that the intense trauma, the wide-eyed fear, and the inability to coherently recall the event were not a result of exposure, but of the child realizing he had been abandoned or displaced. He was a captive, suddenly found, and terrified of his surroundings. The swapping of a child is a horrific concept, but for the millions who saw the visual evidence, the differences in that final official photograph provided the only logical explanation for the greatest unanswered question in the Ryker Webb's case. Why did the boy who came back look so profoundly, structurally different from the boy who left? Beyond the swaps and the strange energy fields, a far more chilling explanation could be the cause for Ryker's journey: abduction. This theory suggests the incident was not an accident, but a calculated act of a crime. The premise is simple. Ryker didn't wander away, he was taken. Within moments of being out of sight, he was snatched from the property by a stranger. The motive is irrelevant to the initial event. It could be anything, from a random opportunist to a local figure with criminal intent. But once the perpetrator realized the scale of the impending search, dozens of officers, helicopters, and volunteers, holding the child became too risky. The goal then shifts from abduction to cover-up. The shed, 2.4 miles away, serves this motive perfectly. The kidnapper drives the child far away, deposits him in the remote temporary shelter, and leaves. The hope is simple. Ryker is found, the story is labeled a miracle survival, the search ends, and the trail goes cold immediately. This theory provides a rational, although sinister, explanation for the profound trauma in his eyes and the lack of a clear memory. The boy wasn't lost to the cold, he was held captive. His mind's defense mechanism erased the memory of his captor and the ride through the woods. Beyond the kidnappings and the dimensional rifts, for many, Ryker Webb's case touched upon something far older, far more insidious, a primal evil whispered about in the shadows of North American folklore: the Skinwalker. For this theory, the immediate evidence lay in Ryker's altered appearance: the hollow, lifeless eyes, the perceived changes in his head shape, the profound shift in his demeanor. This wasn't just trauma, they claimed. This was the mark of something non-human, something that had either influenced, possessed, or even subtly shape-shifted the child. The Skinwalker, perhaps disguised as an animal, a bear or even the family dog, lured Ryker away from his home. The 48-hour disappearance wasn't just being lost, it was being held in a place or by a force that existed outside the normal flow of time and space. The remote shed became an unnerving focal point. Was it a point of release, a location imbued with its own strange energy? Or was it, for a Skinwalker, merely a temporary container for a human it no longer wished to influence, but had irrevocably changed? The Ryker Webb case, for those who believe, is not just a story of a lost child. It's a chilling echo of ancient fears, a modern encounter with an entity that leaves its victims changed, disturbed, and forever marked by what lurks in the deepest, darkest parts of the wilderness. The official report states that a lost child was miraculously found, but when we weigh the official story against the strange evidence of the case, The questions eclipse the answers. We are left with a child who traversed an impossible distance through rugged, unforgiving terrain, found in an unnaturally perfect sanctuary, wearing clothes that should have guaranteed death by hypothermia. We are left with a 48-hour blank slate, a crucial piece of memory sealed behind a psychological wall. And above all, we are left with the photo, the singular piece of evidence that convinced millions that the boy who returned was irrevocably changed. The boy who left was smiling. The boy who came back was visibly terrified, bearing the deep visual scars of an ordeal he cannot or will not describe. The true legacy of the Ryker Webb case is not the miracle of his survival, but that he returned to tell a story so strange, so unsettling, that it forced the world to question reality itself. The woods of Montana gave him back, but they did not give him back whole. What happened in those 48 hours? Was he the victim of an unseen force, or was he a silent witness to something unspeakable? Drop your opinions in the comments below. If you haven't already, make sure to like the video and subscribe. And thank you for venturing into the dark with me. The world is full of things we can't explain, but we'll keep looking. Until next time, I'm Kylie, and remember, the truth is often hidden by night.